Hi, my name is Michael Rhodes, and today I'm talking about the search for self, that eternal search. And it takes people all over the world, people looking for themselves. And they go on long quests. Some of them put themselves through enormous hardship and deprivation. Some people live in caves up in the mountains. Some put themselves in monasteries. We do all sorts of things, and we're looking for this. We're looking for ourselves. And yet, you know, we are who we've always been. We are who we're looking for. Okay, now if you judge the person we are, then that person isn't who you're looking for. That's your judgment. But that isn't a truth. That's simply a judgment we make of each other. Why do we judge ourselves? Because we judge other people. And if we judge ourselves, we will judge other people. If we judge other people, we will judge ourselves. That's the way it works. And so when you make a judgment on yourself, then you don't, very rarely do you say, oh God, I'm perfect. I'm absolutely perfect. That doesn't happen, because a judgment always has the guilt consciousness, the not good enough consciousness. In other words, innocence does not make a judgment. And so you're always going to find yourself guilty because you have the consciousness of guilt, the consciousness of not good enough. That is the consciousness that judges. And I'm talking about on a personal level. I'm not talking about our courts, although they're not so very different. And so why do we look at ourselves through a framework of negativity, through a framework of judgment? Why do we look for guilt and to blame ourselves? Because blame, you know, I've traveled the world 30 years and I've talked to a lot of people as a spiritual teacher, and blame is so prevalent in people's lives. Self-blame. Sure, we blame other people, but we blame ourselves for so much. And it's interesting, I noticed that if you watch our television programs, and some of the ones, the people in it, if something happens in the plot, one of the most common themes is they blame themselves for something that happened. And it's nothing to do with them. But they didn't drive that car, or they didn't do this, or they didn't do that. And yet so they blame themselves. And you realize how utterly ridiculous it is if you're sitting there watching it dispassionately. How could you possibly blame yourself for that? But in everyday life this happens. And they're actually depicting it far truer to everyday life. In everyday life, people blame themselves for things that they shouldn't. And then, of course, along with blame goes regret. And so then people regret stuff that they did in the past. There has to be a point where all this has a use-by date. And probably enlightenment is that point where you let go of all that and release all that. But it's so difficult for people to grasp the idea that you are already who you're looking for. And I've mentioned this before, that if we believe in God, and if we believe that God is perfect, and if we believe God created in its own image, then that means that God created perfectly. And that means just possibly you are perfect already. And if you don't put a judgment on that, what do you have? You have perfection. If you don't judge yourself and look at what you're not, then you have something called inner peace. And so everything that I talk about in these short videos, everything connects with everything else. There's no way you can separate this into a certain individual study of something. Everything connects. And the more you feel the oneness of life, the more difficult it is to remove the connections between every subject. So I'm taking a series of subjects here to talk about, but it all connects, and you can't avoid that connection. So to follow on with this theme, you are who you're looking for. You are the person that you're meant to be. Now, Why is that so difficult to accept? Because a lot of people like that idea intellectually, but they can't live it. And living it is what this is all about. There is no such thing as an intellectual path to peace, to unconditional love and trust, to enlightenment, or any of these things. There's no intellectual path to it. We have to embrace it and live it. Sometimes I jokingly say at the end of an intensive, okay folks, everything I've said you've got intellectually, but now is the time to live it. And if you catch one of your frogs, local frogs, and you have it in your bedroom in a little bowl with lots of moisture, all night it will go, live it, live it, live it, live it, live it, live it, and all day you can live it. And the frog's giving you the program to live it. So you are who you are meant to be, you are who you are supposed to be, and you are a divine being. You are that magnificent, metaphysical, multidimensional, eternal being of love and light. All these things you are. Nothing that you can do is going to improve on that. All you can do by accepting such things is growing consciousness. And who is growing in consciousness? The person you are. And you're growing toward the person you're meant to be. But it's the person you're meant to be who is growing toward the person you're meant to be. Because we are who we are. It is as it is. And so this is not trying to be tricky with words. What I'm saying is there is no difficulty here. There is no great complication. There is no mass that we have to correct. I've been through my own process of enlightenment. And you know, I had spent 15 years reading spiritual books. And my process was a very difficult one and a very painful one, as gradually everything was stripped away from me. And I'm pretty well helpless on the ground. I have a terrible back pain that I'd had for 20 years, but I was paralyzed with it. My face was blown up with cellulitis and I looked a mess. And I felt completely hopeless. I felt a total failure. At the end of 15 years, this is what it reduced me to. And I was sitting, looking into a mirror, and all I wanted to do is say, I love you. And I couldn't. All I could do was cry. I could not say to my reflection, I love you. And you know what hit me like a ton of bricks? Everything I had learned was useless. Nothing that I'd learned in 15 years of reading all the books I could lay my hands on. There was nothing there in that moment to help. Nothing at all. It was as though I'd never read a single book. And then it hit me very hard at that moment. Everything I learned was in my head. It was all intellectual. It was in my brain. It wasn't in me. It wasn't in my being. It wasn't soul knowledge. I hadn't fully embraced it. I did my best to live it, but somehow that knowledge was outside of me and I couldn't bring it in. And I realized if I brought it in, it's still useless because it's knowledge. It's not reality. It's not the fact that I was struggling with to let go, let go, let go. And finally I had to let go of me, of Michael Rhodes. And I hadn't a clue how to do that. How do I let go of me? And so I struggled and struggled with that, and this was toward the end of the whole process. And trust me, it was not an intellectual one. And finally, and suddenly it hit me, there is no Michael Rose. This is just a name I've put to an identity, and I'm not that identity. There is no Michael Rose to let go of. He doesn't exist. He's an idea. He's always been an idea. He's just an incarnation of something far greater than I am. And in that moment, I realized there is no Michael Rose and there was nothing to let go of. And in that moment was enlightenment, because I'd finally got to the bottom of the barrel. And in that moment of enlightenment, I discovered I was exactly the same person before, except I was in light. It meant Enlightenment, in light it meant. And I was in so much light, every cell in my body was a light. And in that, all the dross, all the negativity, all the negative thoughts, all the self-judgment, it all just was burned up. Like a moth in front of a flame, it was gone. And inside there was nothing left but except we could say light. Anxiety was gone, worry, everything was gone, and I didn't bring any of it back. And so it's not like I was suddenly a different person. I was the same person, but I'd had a leap in consciousness, a quantum leap. And you can't organize that, you can't fight for it, you can only surrender to it happening. And it happens to the person you are, the being you are, the being you're meant to be. It all comes out. You are what you're looking for. You already are that. But as long as you keep looking, you're holding away that you are that being. You're putting it aside, you're putting it on hold. You're not allowing even the concept of perfection to come in. So this great struggle we've turned it into, the thing that hit me afterwards, be honest, I laughed for nearly 3 days. My late wife was sick of me laughing. I thought it was so funny. I looked in the mirror and I saw this beautiful me looking back, and I laughed because I'd never, ever seen a beautiful me. I saw a me that I judged, a face that I didn't particularly approve of, didn't really like it at all. And it was all gone. There was a beautiful face there, a beautiful person, a beautiful being. And I laughed because I didn't get it. How could this be so ridiculously simple? I hadn't done anything. The 15 years was just like walking in circles until finally I decided to stop circling. And so you are already the being you're looking for. And all you've got to do is allow that being to emerge. You don't have to drag it out. You simply allow that being to emerge. Some people can do that much easier than others. The less the negative chatter in your head, the easier it is. My advice would be to live more in your heart, to think more from your heart, to be more in your heart and a whole lot less in your head. That would put you on the right track. And to finish it off, I would suggest that in everything that happens in your life, where there's confrontations, arguments, conflict or everything, and with yourself on a daily basis, when you begin to move into the negative self-talk, I would consciously choose love.